Dear listeners, today you're listening to the 29th episode of The Inkwell, a podcast where I interview various linguists, teachers, polyglots, and other interesting multilinguals. Our today's guest is Urmi Hussein. Urmi grew up in Italy, but she's not your regular Italian. As she says herself, she is Italian by birth, yet Bengali by blood. More than a decade ago, she relocated to Quebec, and she has been living and working there ever since. If you're curious to know more about the Bengali language, the cultural differences between Italian and Canadian ways of life, or the reasons behind some of the tensions that are still plaguing India and Pakistan today, I think you're going to enjoy our today's show. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, be sure to do so. It helps to keep the project growing. With that out of the way, let's get started. Hello, Urmi.
Hi,
It's very nice to see you. Thanks for joining in today.
very nice to meet you.
By the way, I'm very cautious when I'm speaking to people who have an unknown name to me. So, how should I correctly pronounce your name?
It's Urmi.
Urmi. That's beautiful. Urmi, tell me, from what kind of language is your name taken?
It's a Bengali name, and it means wave.
Wave. Okay, that's cool. That's even that's even prettier than first when you have the association.
Thank you.
So, Urmi, I read on your LinkedIn profile that you are a third culture kid, Italian by birth and Bengali by blood. And from what I know, you currently reside in Quebec. So I guess that's the third culture part, right? So Bengali, Italian, and also Quebecan. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a bit about your background. So it will be kind of like a short self-introduction of sorts.
For her, it'll be my pleasure. So yes, I am a third culture kid. I am born and raised in Italy, and my parents are from Bangladesh. And I always say to everyone, I am Italian by birth and Bengali by blood, and that's something that it's important for me to specify, because I think often people don't associate me with neither one of the cultures. And I struggled a little bit when I moved to Canada, because people were just wondering where I was from.
Mhm.
And no matter what kind of answer I gave, people were questioning. If I said I am Bengali, people would question it because I had a very strong Italian accent when I would speak English. And if I said I am Italian, then people would question it even further, because they're like, you don't look Italian. So after years of introspection, I finally came to conclude that I am Italian Bengali. And yes, you did mention that I live in Quebec. I do live in Montreal, which is a melting pot, but I never really associate myself completely to being Canadian, even though I do have a Canadian passport. I do feel I am I'm strongly Italian and strongly Bengali. So those are two things that really do belong to me. But I do think that my life in Canada has helped me to shape this cultural aspect, which I don't think I would have got if I was still living in Italy.
Understood. And from what I know, you also speak a variety of languages. So, of course, Italian, Bengali, and as we can hear, English are part of these languages. We also have French. Most probably it's due to your life in Quebec. And also, you had said that you're studying Spanish. So you're somewhere in the middle with regards to Spanish. So that's a lot of languages to fit in one head, and also quite different ones, especially when we add Bengali. And tell me a little bit, how did you learn these languages? They come to you by living in different places, or have you studied them somehow differently?
So some languages that I have learned were by choice, and some others were not by choice. The fact that I was born and raised in Italy was almost given that I had to learn Italian. And I often say Italian is my adopted mother tongue, because I started to speak it
Mhm.
at a very, very young age, especially because I was going to school and so forth. And I would also start to speak it at home as well with my parents and my sister. And my parents, both of them are Bengali, and they speak Bengali. So they would speak to me and my sister in Bengali. So that's how I picked up the Bengali side. And even then, like I even now I still speak to them in Bengali with some Italian here and there. But with my sister, for instance, I just speak Italian with her. That's the way we communicate with each other. And of course, in Italy, in the education system, they teach you, of course, how to speak English because it's the international language. And then I did a special program where I had the chance to learn French, and I also had the chance to learn German. But German, I never considered it as a language that I know because I forgot it and I don't remember anything about this language. Like I knew how to speak it. I had like certification, like saying that I can speak the language, but it's something that I have not practiced in many, many years. So I completely lost it. And then in university, I took some Spanish classes because I have this love for the Spanish language. I just love the sound of this language. So I took a couple of classes, and because I didn't want to do the same mistake that I had done with German, I was like, I have to keep learning and studying and revising. So I listen to podcasts now. I watch stuff in Spanish, and with French, yes, I did study French in Italy. But when I moved to Canada, the French in Canada, especially in Quebec, is very different from the French that you learn back at school. In Italy, especially, like it's the one in Italy, it's the French from France, and that's what we are exposed to. But in Montreal, like it's the Quebecois, so it's a completely different it's a completely different beast, basically. Like it's a different accent, different expression. People speak differently, so that too was for me like a learning process, like going over some of the rules of the French grammar, but be able to also understand the accent, the Quebecois accent.
And of course, the vocabulary,
Yeah.
most likely it is also quite different. So even when you compare, let's say, because I'm a Portuguese learner, so when I compare European Portuguese with Brazilian Portuguese, for example, even though the grammar is more or less, I wouldn't say the same, but quite similar, there are only a few differences. And of course, Brazilians are a little bit more fluid with the grammar. It might come with culture as well. So there's more fluidity. There's more, you can rearrange the sentence in a little bit more ways. Whereas European Portuguese is more structured, more, this is how we do. We put the word here and not there. There's one place. That's okay. So there are certain differences, but the most differences are in terms of vocabulary, because at least Brazilian Portuguese has been influenced a lot by different native languages in Brazil, for example. So a lot of words were adopted from the native South American tribes and so on. So it's quite an interesting twist on the Portuguese language. But when we think about, let's say, Quebecan French, when you came at first and you tried to speak the French that you had learned at school, for example, or at university, what was your first experiences of speaking with local people there?
Have a struggle, have such a big struggle because honestly, it was such a struggle. I remember this because I remember talking to people and saying, yeah, you can speak to me in French. But the moment they would start speaking, I would just freeze. I would freeze because I was like, I don't know what the hell she said. And I couldn't, and I was not able to answer. It was like I had a natural block. I had a natural block from it.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not good. This is not, like, I spent all these years learning French and now I'm living in a country where they speak it, but I'm not able to use it and apply. There's something wrong. And I did have a lot of struggle, I have to say, because even when I would go to the store, but well, the thing is, here in Montreal, they approach you in both languages, in English and in French, and then you choose in which language you want to be served or you want to speak to the person. And I remember like people would speak to me, like I would always choose French at the beginning and they would speak to me and I would never understand. But if it was written, then I would understand what was going on. So it was really a problem of the accent. And then afterwards, I was like, you know what? I have to do something about it because otherwise I'm going to lose it. And if I don't, practice the listening and
Mhm.
how you speak it, then, it's like I'm losing this other language that I know. So then afterwards, I took some classes that were mainly based in like listening and speaking, like mainly conversational. And then I had a friend who also helped me. Like I would spend my lunch hour with a friend, and then we would just have conversation about the day and what happened just in French. And so that's how I was able to pick it up and get the accent. And now I am to the point that I am able to work. I work in a French environment, so I do work with Quebecois clients. But I am able to recognize different accents now. Like I know when it's an accent from France, like French from France. I know when it's French from Switzerland. I know when it's French from Belgium, for instance, or from Mauritius. So now I'm able to recognize all the different accents. So that has helped me a lot. But it was a lot of work that I had to do on my own to really be able to pick up the accent, being able to speak it. Like it was not never about the grammar or it was never about the vocabulary. It was just the accent.
Well, what I remember is I follow one guy. I listen to his podcast in Portuguese. It helps quite a lot to learn a foreign language, at least in terms of comprehension, to listen to content in the language, which does make sense, but not many people do it. So if you don't do it, please do. It will help you improve at least your comprehension. And he was speaking how he managed to overcome the plateau of intermediate level in, let's say, French. So he's also a French speaker. He's a Portuguese by origin, but he learned French to a native level. But he was stuck in the intermediate level for a long time, and he just couldn't feel that he can get out of it in any ways. So, but what actually helped is to establish relationships with people from day one in the language that you want to learn. So let's say you meet a French person, and of course, maybe it will be easier for you to communicate with him in English. And probably for the person, it will also be easier to communicate with you in English. But you kind of persist and you start speaking in French and you build a relationship in French. And the next time you see the person, it's again natural for you to speak in French because that's how your first meeting went. And you kind of build the friendship in the French language. And I think this is one of the best ways to actually expose yourself to the native sounds, also everyday conversations, and just getting to get more involved in the language. So I believe that's what also helped you to transition and also adapt your French to the peculiarities of Quebecan French.
Yes.
Did I understand that it was the main thing that actually helped you out there?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what you said. Like I, with this friend, I was just speaking French. And even now, I only speak in French with him. Like we don't use English. And it's a little bit like you said, like when you start, like if the language that you use to communicate is a certain language, you keep using that every time you meet a person. Like every time you meet this friend, and that's exactly what I do. He's the only person that I think I speak in French with, who is part of my circle of friends. And then there are, of course, other people that I work with, which is only in French. Like we don't use English. And it's good because now it's like more natural for me to expose myself or to just communicate just directly in French. Because before it was always English, but now I just go and just use French, and I use it even a lot more, even when I'm like around going out, instead of just using English, which was the language of my comfort. I go with the one that it's more uncomfortable, and I think it just made me more at ease, and I'm much more comfortable using that to communicate. It's part of me now that I don't say it's a language that I'm learning. It's not anymore. It's just a language that it's part of my luggage of the things that I know.
Well, this kind of goes against the claim that language learning is accidental and supernatural, and you just listen and you are able to speak. It's not magic. It's actually it's a lot of that, but it's also a lot of effort on the speaker's part as well. It's that's why I believe there are many people living in Quebec that have been living there for like 20 years, and they still cannot speak French on the same level as you do. And the main difference is because some people take an active part in language learning, and other people just think that I will just somehow magically absorb it and everything's going to be okay. Unfortunately, that's not how things go. So definitely effort on the other person's part and being active is super important. And please tell me a little bit about the Bengali language, because for many people that come from, let's say, the North American continents, or even South American continents, European continents, French, Italian, English, it's something that they know definitely about, something at least. Maybe they don't speak, but they have heard, let's say, at least once an Italian speaker or a French speaker speaking the language. When it comes to Bengali, it's quite different. And most people, unfortunately, I think don't, even some of the listeners might not know where do people actually speak Bengali. But from my research, I believe it's in modern day Bangladesh and West Bengal state in India. So this is kind of the main two areas where Bengali is being spoken. So could you please tell us a little bit more about the language, and is it very different from, let's say, Hindu? Can a Hindu speaker and a Bengali speaker understand each other like an Italian and maybe a Spanish speaker, or Italian and French speaker? Or is it like when German starts to speak with Portuguese, it's like nothing to be understood there?
So here's what I can tell you. When it came to Bengali, I only learned the spoken Bengali. I did not learn the grammar. I did not learn how to read, or write. I did learn a little bit the alphabet, but it is something that I never put too much time in it, because I knew it that I was never going to use it, even though I do regret a little bit not taking the time to learn how to write and read just for my own knowledge. And it wasn't even because I wanted to use it somewhere else in the future. So that's one of the regret that I have. What I can tell you is that it's right. It's spoken in those places in Bangladesh and in other places in the West India as well. But when it comes to how similar it is to, let's say, Hindi or Urdu, um, it's very similar. It's we do have similar, like with Hindi, we do have similar alphabet. There are very similar words, very similar, especially because back in the days, like these countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh were one big country. And then there was the war, civil war,
Yes.
there was this whole separation between the two. So there are some residuals that came from the fact that they were one country. So the languages are similar, but not so much at the same time. Like I watch, for instance, Bollywood movies, and I put subtitles when I watch them, but I do understand even without subtitles. And because some words are similar, but I'm not sure if it's the other way around, where someone who speaks Hindi can understand us. Because even in Bangladesh, there are different dialects, very different dialects, so which are very different from each other. Like I don't understand a dialect spoken in another part of Bangladesh, for instance. So I'm not sure if like people who speak in Hindi can understand us, because they're not exposed so much to the Bengali movies as much as we are exposed to the movies in Bollywood, for instance. I do think that Urdu and Hindi are much similar in a way, very, very similar. But yeah, it is very different. We use a very different alphabet. It sounds very different. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all I can say. Yeah.
Okay. And I have been exposed to a little bit of conversations between, let's say, some people living in India versus some people living in Pakistan or Bangladesh, because I sometimes post content on my Instagram about, well, languages, and inevitably sometimes people start name calling each other, or there are some arguments which have nothing to do with the video. Like it's even almost even maybe remotely somehow connected, but it's so far away that you can't even understand how these conflicts have begun. And I've noticed that there are quite, at least on the, maybe it's not like the reality of the people living, maybe it's just social media trolls, but how come there are still so many, how to say, animosities between some people in Bangladesh, Pakistan, India? Because for a person coming from another background, I could understand why there are animosities between Russians and Ukrainians, for example, because that's my cultural surrounding. I understand the two cultures and I can comprehend, whereas some other people will not be able to. And I feel quite similar when I think about the conflicts happening between Indians, Pakistanis, and people from Bangladesh. So I know that it's due to history, and you said
Yeah.
civil war. It's
Yeah.
also imperial history, so post-colonial history of. So could you maybe um, guide us through a little bit of how the animosity came about and why does it still persist? And if it's there, still there in any way, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just trolls on social media.
Yes, so it is still there, unfortunately, and it comes from history. All the origins are from the history because the three countries used to be one big country, and then they had like civil war, and then they separated after the wars, and it was always about which territory belongs to who. And basically, what happened is India got the independence first, and then afterwards it was Bangladesh and Pakistan who had a war, and then they separated. But the issue is not between India and Bangladesh; it's Bangladesh and India against Pakistan. And
Hmm.
that's where the conflict is there. I mean, there are still some people who feel very bitter about it because of these wars that happened really long time ago. We're talking about 50 years ago, even more, but people are still very like bitter about this whole situation that happened in the past. And now basically even between, let's say, India and Pakistan, there's still this kind of conflict because of Kashmir, for instance, where they're trying to say, okay, Kashmir belongs to India, now Kashmir belongs to Pakistan. So there's still that type of conflict because of the territory, like which territory belongs to who. And the problem is, I think we can get past this, but I also notice that when I watch Bollywood movies, there's always that message, like it's the war between India and Pakistan. He always goes back to that. And I'm not sure why they're trying to always portray that kind of message in the media. But every single movie that I watch from Bollywood, they're always about this, like it's a war between India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan. Indians are very patriarchal, so they always show like, we won the war, like we are winning this, and every time it's always India winning. But I and this is one of the reasons why sometimes I'm not a big fan of this kind of movies, because I'm like, you're always showing the same message, and we're a little bit sick and tired of seeing this. And the problem is that some generations afterward, they're like, they don't allow, for instance, their kid to get married with someone. Let's say you're Indian and you're married someone from Pakistan. That's a big no, for instance, because of the history that was behind. Some generations, even nowadays, they still don't want their kids to marry someone from Pakistan, for instance, because of this whole issue. But there are some others who are very open about this. But I know that back in the days, like when I was growing up, I know that this was a big no. Like you're not supposed to be dating someone from Pakistan, for instance, because there was this whole war before.
Well, it's, I guess, part of the social conditioning of people because if, let's say, you can watch movies, I will use the example of Russia in this regard because I know quite more about it than I could speak about other countries. But also in the movies, in even in the cartoons, you can already see like this grand idea of this grand country against the world, against the crooked West, against the traitors of Soviet Union or whatever. This is like us against the world. We are the best. The world is rotten, but we will overcome it. So I guess, and people who watch this kind of content from being like very young, they already get conditioned in the same mindset that we are the best, the world is evil, we have to fix the evil because we are God sent to do it.
Yeah.
So it's a very complicated scenario,
Yeah.
and I guess in some patriotic nationalistic sense in India there is some of that as well, unfortunately. And but it is what it is. I was just very curious to know what's the relationship between the three countries and the three groups of people in some ways, because Bengali and Bangladesh is not just a country, it's not just a language, it's also an ethnicity, at least from what I know. So it's an ethnic group. It's an identity based on that as well. And most likely that's where quite some problems come from. Let's say, I don't know if Pakistani is also an ethnic identity, or is it a national political identity. So it's, of course, we might not have enough time to get into it today, but I guess it would be good to research it, because every major conflict has its roots somewhere deep in deep history, and that could be also some of the problems there. But anyway, moving away from languages and other related topics, I would like to ask you about you professionally. So you said that you have moved to France. Oh, sorry. You have said that you have moved to Quebec. And when did you first come there? And why did you choose Quebec for starters? And how did your life evolve once you had made the transfer?
So I moved here ages ago. Ages ago, it's been a
Yeah.
decade, more than a decade, and I moved to a personal reason. And I can definitely say my life has changed a lot, and I think it's probably because it was in a different phase of my life, and I do think it changed in a better way, because I feel like it has Canada, especially Montreal, has helped me to evolve myself as a person, or the person that I am today. I do think it's a land of it's a country of opportunities, and I think it did allow me to try different things. And never in my whole life I would have thought that I would have worked in an environment where I'm speaking a language that I never used back at home. That was something that it never crossed my mind. And I did my university here, so I do have a background in finance. And then afterwards, I just started to work here. I do work in the financial sector, um, and it was an evolution. I can definitely say it was an evolution because of the fact that I got to be exposed to different people from different ethnicity, from different countries, people who speak different languages. And those, I would say, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of Montreal, because I've not seen that back in Italy, for instance. Like, for instance, in Italy, I only saw Italian people. There are immigrants, but not as much. Not when I was growing up. Whereas here is, you see it everywhere. Like, the person next to you is not Quebecois. Like, it could be from another country. So that's the beauty of it. I think it helped me also to learn a little bit about myself, to learn about other cultures, to appreciate also what I have and what I can offer. Because because in a way I did feel like it was not normal that I was not able to find my identity or define myself with an identity. But I think the fact that I've seen other people like me a lot more through culture kids, it has helped me to also define myself and understand who I am as a person.
And because you have a lot of experience and memories from your life in Italy, and you have already spent over a decade in Quebec, I don't know how much you were exposed to the Bengali culture of Bangladesh. I don't know how much time you were able to spend there, but I would just be curious, what are some main cultural differences that you have noticed between, let's say, Italy and Quebec? in terms of just everyday life. It's like simple things, but most of the times the simple things are the most interesting ones. And also, if you could add in Bangladesh, that would be also very interesting. But yet, I don't know how much we can share on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think my biggest culture shock was the weather when I moved to Montreal. Like now, I think the weather is a bit better because of global warming. Like it's less cold. But I remember in my first few years, it was such a struggle. Like it was a struggle. Like I remember going to university in a -30, and I was like, who is making me do this? Who's
Wow.
making me do this? And that was the biggest struggle. The freezing rain was another culture shock. We don't have freezing rain in Italy. We do have it in Quebec, and I think it's like that was something also that I was like, what is this? Because everything, I don't know if you're familiar with freezing rain, but when it rains, everything becomes icy. It's very dangerous to walk on a freezing rain because
Wow.
it feels like you're
Yeah.
walking on a skating rink. And I remember this was a struggle because I kept falling. That was one big shock. The second shock was the coffee. That was something I remember, like buying the coffee and being like, what is this? Because in Italy we drink the espresso, and here it's like it's in the big cup, and I was like, is this how I'm supposed to be drinking coffee? Is this normal? And people here, they buy the coffee and they walk away, but in Italy you don't do that. You sit in the coffee place, you drink
Yes.
it in the coffee place, you have it with your croissant. Whereas in Montreal, they have the coffee to go. And if they're having breakfast somewhere, it's like a heavy breakfast with potatoes, eggs, sausage. I don't know what else they have. Like they have all this like heavy breakfast. And I'm like, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I really like that. And the other shock that I had was, okay, so when people here take the bus or the metro, they line up. They literally create a line and then they go inside. Whereas in Italy, no one creates a line. People are just pushing to get inside the bus or inside the metro. They're pushing you to get out. They're pushing you to get in. Like it's incredible. But here, people are much more polite because they literally wait like in the line, and then whoever comes first goes in first. Whoever comes last goes in last. And so that's another thing that I have noticed. And another culture shock, I just have, I think, so many. Another culture shock is that here everything is open Monday to Sunday. But
Yes.
during the week, everything is like to reduce hours, like it's like 10 to 5 or something like that. And then weekends,
Yeah.
it's also 10 or 9 to 5. And then I think Thursday, Friday, it's 10 to 8 or something like that. And in Italy, it does not work like that. Like usually Sundays, things are closed, even though I think in some touristic places, things are open. But during the week, like things close really late, like 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock. So for me, when I get out of work, when they say I want to do something, I can't do anything because everything is closed. And so that was a
Oh,
shock for me.
that's sad.
Yeah, that was a big shock for me because I was like, okay, like everything closes at 5. Like what am I supposed to be doing? And so those were the biggest shock. And to reply about the Bengali side, so I never lived in Bangladesh, but I did visit it. And I can definitely tell you that Bangladesh, it's a country of similarities, but also contrasts. And there's a lot of, I want to say, it's very like colorful in a way, in every kind of sense. And when I was living in Italy, we did have a very small community of Bengali people. And one thing that I can definitely say is that we do have a value of, community, connecting with people, values of family, building relationship. Those are some of the things that we enjoy doing, like getting together, eating together. And I think one of the things that I enjoy the most about my culture is that we do have a very colorful, we have a very colorful meals. Like our dishes are, they just have different colors, and we just cook everything, and it's a very good cuisine, I can say. So that's all I can say for now.
Very good. Very good. And maybe one of the last questions would be, I would really want to ask you about relationships with people who have never left their own culture or country. Because you're a person who has traveled a lot, you come from very different backgrounds, you have learned many different languages, you have seen a lot of the world. And always we have some family members, some friends, some acquaintances from the past who have always lived in the same cultural context and haven't learned other languages, was not that are not very interested in other ways of life. And in terms of communicating your life experience, let's say if you still have some friends, acquaintances, or family members, do you sometimes struggle to connect with people from the past and share who you are today? Because I feel sometimes a little bit that these type of people are not very well understood by someone from their deep past. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I had this struggle when I was growing up in Italy because my surrounding was just a circle of Italian friends and only Italian people. So whenever I had to explain myself about why I couldn't do certain things, why I couldn't eat certain things, it was always like I have to make an extra step to explain myself, which is sometimes really tiring. But I try to, be understanding and be like, it's also new for them. It's also new for them, and probably they were never exposed to this kind of to people, to someone who's different from that. So for me, that was the struggle when I was growing up. And of course, things have evolved. The world has changed. Now we have people from all over the world, and I'm thinking it should be easier, but it's not always that easy. And I think it goes back to the point that you made, that some people, they're just rooted in that one single culture. They have just lived in one single place, that I don't think they got enough exposure to people from different cultures. So sometimes I think some of the question that I'm asked, it comes from ignorance. It comes from ignorance
Mhm.
because you have not really took the time to learn the other person. And it can get a bit frustrating because you're like, I'm trying to explain it to you, and you keep making the same point, and I don't think you're listening to what I'm saying. And so that it's
Yeah.
something that I thought it has changed, but it has not. And so I'm always explaining myself, and I still feel like people are not understanding me, which is upsetting sometimes, because you're like, we're in 2024. You're supposed to be knowing that, there are different kinds of people, different identities. You have to, make an effort to be a little bit more open-minded. But I'm aware that I think some people, because they always have lived in a bubble, they're very close-minded. So it's up to me to help them, be more open-minded, to educate them. But I do think that it still comes from the fact that, you have not taken the time to be exposed to this other different kind of people. Yeah.
Well, also, I would agree that it's ignorance, but also there's a very good term that I heard some time ago. It's also willful blindness. So, in a way, you're blind or ignorant to something, but by your own wanting. So maybe the other person would like to kind of, as you say, open up the bubble and let in some new information, but you choose to not take it in. So it's not just like that this ignorance is by accidents. Some people want to see the world as they see. They don't want to change their opinions about
Yeah.
it. And that's it. And if they decide, for example, that a certain culture does not exist, or certain country, or certain language, and it's just like some ideas that people have, well, you cannot really make this person change their mind, because they have made an internal decision that this is how I see the world, and this is how I'm going to continue to see the world. So even in the 2024, for example, I don't think that by any means of education or exposure, it's possible to change some people who think like that, just because it's an internal decision to see the world like that,
Yeah.
whatever the cost. And it's problematic because it also um brings up a lot of polarization. And so, of course, this is not a very um, it's not a very calm time. It's quite chaotic.
Yeah.
And of course, you're not residing in the United States, you're residing in Canada. So maybe you're not exposed to the same problems that most Americans are exposed in terms of political polarization and so on.
Mhm.
So I just wonder, what's the milieu of Canadian life? Is everything going quite smoothly, quite calm, or is
And
it in any ways related to the neighbor?
now I can definitely tell you it's definitely a lot calmer. Definitely a lot calmer. This is why I think a
I
lot of
got
people come to Canada.
right. Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, anyways, with me, I would like to respect your time. You said that you have another call waiting for you pretty soon. So we could maybe put an end to the first part of the conversation today. And of course, there's still a lot to talk about. We haven't yet talked about your work and trying to help women with leadership and finance. And that's a whole separate subject altogether. So I think we could explore it during our next meeting. So I just want to really, really thank you for spending some time and also educating me, shining light on Bengali language, on the different about Quebec as well. You know, unfortunately, I cannot be at all places and all times and all people. So speaking with people like you really also brightens my day. So big thanks for joining in today.
Thank you.
Till next time.